The blizzard slammed into the Canadian Rockies with a ferocity that 72-year-old Margaret hadn't witnessed in the 4 decades she'd lived in those mountains. The snow fell so densely she could barely make out the woodshed from her kitchen window, and the wind screamed through the trees like a choir of lost spirits circling her small log cabin. She should have stayed indoors. That was exactly what her daughter, Ava, would have insisted, what her son, Mateo, would have ordered her to do. But Amelia had never been the type to obey shoulds. Not after Thomas had passed 3 years earlier. And tonight, something in that storm sounded wrong. The wind wasn't only wind. Beneath its roar was something else, something like a cry. Faint, fading. A sound that tugged at the hollow place inside her chest. The same hollow place that had never fully healed since the day they lowered Thomas into the frozen earth. Before we continue Amelia's journey, we'd love to invite you to subscribe to Animal Rescue Tales. Every subscription helps us continue sharing touching, emotional tales about the extraordinary connections between humans and the natural world. Please subscribe and help us spread compassion for the animal kingdom. Amelia reached for her husband's old forest ranger coat, still hanging by the door, just where he'd left it the morning he never came home. The heavy jacket swallowed her small frame, but it was warm, still smelling of pine, smoke, and Thomas. She wrapped a wool scarf around her neck, pulled on her worn boots, and stepped out into the storm. The cold struck her like a punch. The temperature had plunged to 20 below, and even Thomas's thick coat couldn't fully shield her from the cutting wind. Squinting through the swirling snow, she followed that not-quite wind sound. With every step, her boots sank deep, and each breath burst from her mouth in frozen white clouds. She should turn back, logic screamed it. But logic hadn't mattered much since the day she watched them lower her husband of 47 years into the ground. She found the source about 50 yards from the cabin, right at the forest's edge where the pines stood black and dense. A female wolf lay sprawled on her side in the snow, her gray-white coat already buried under fresh powder. Amelia had seen enough death in these mountains to recognize it instantly. Someone had shot the wolf recently. The blood staining the snow still shone red despite the storm's attempts to cover it. It was illegal, of course. Wolves were protected here, but people still ignored the law. Thomas had spent half his career chasing poachers across these woods. Then the sound came again, softer now. A weak, fading whimper. It came from beneath the mother wolf's stiff body. A tiny, shadow-colored shape barely visible against her stomach. Amelia dropped to her knees despite her protesting joints, and gently lifted the wolf's front leg. There, so small he could fit into both her hands, was a wolf pup. His coat was dark, almost black, and his eyes were still sealed shut. He couldn't have been more than 2 weeks old. As she watched, he opened his tiny mouth and let out another thin cry. That fragile sound cracked something inside her that had long been hardened by grief. She could almost hear Thomas's voice beside her. Asterisk, nature has its ways, Amelia. We can't save them all. Asterisk. He'd said it 100 times whenever they found abandoned fawns or wounded birds. Asterisk. The wild takes care of its own. Or it doesn't. Asterisk. But Thomas had died trying to save a wild creature. A deer caught in barbed wire. He'd broken through thin ice to free it. He rescued the deer, but the ice gave way completely beneath him. By the time they pulled him out, his lips were blue, his heart already silent. No amount of CPR could bring him back. He died saving something wild, proving that some lives are worth the risk. Amelia slipped the tiny pup inside Thomas's coat, pressing him against her chest. He was so cold, too cold, his breathing almost non-existent. The walk back felt endless. The storm grew even worse, snow falling so thick she could barely see her own footsteps from a moment earlier. She stumbled twice, catching herself on tree trunks, heart hammering with dread. The pup made no movement against her. She pressed her palm to his body, desperately searching for any sign of warmth, any pulse of life. She felt the faintest flutter. "Hold on," she whispered. "Just hold on." Inside, she slammed the cabin door shut and hurried to the fireplace. She built the fire high until flames roared and heat poured out into the room. Then she made a nest of blankets by the hearth and set the pup inside, checking him thoroughly with the careful hands that had helped Thomas rescue countless animals through the years. He was severely hypothermic and dangerously dehydrated. His gums were pale, his body limp. Amelia grabbed warm towels and began rubbing his tiny form, trying to restore circulation and heat, slowly, gently, so his little system wouldn't crash from shock. She worked for 20 minutes before he let out the smallest whimper, his paws twitching. "That's it," she murmured. "Fight." She needed to get fluids into him, but he was far too young to drink on his own. Wolf pups this age survived entirely on their mother's milk. Thick, fatty, full of antibodies he'd never get now. She had no formula, no special supplies. Just the goat milk she used for oatmeal and a medicine dropper Thomas had once used to feed orphan squirrels. She warmed the milk, testing the temperature on her wrist like she had when feeding her own babies decades ago. Then she sat on the floor beside him, lifted his fragile head, and let a single drop fall onto his tongue. He didn't swallow. It just sat there. Amelia felt her heart drop, but then his tiny tongue moved. He swallowed. She gave him another drop. Another swallow. It took 45 minutes to get only 2 tablespoons of milk into him. But by the time she finished, his eyes were twitching beneath their lids, and his breathing sounded stronger. Exhausted, Amelia leaned back against the stone hearth. Outside, the storm held unchecked. Inside, the fire crackled warmly, and curled in a pile of blankets that smelled like her dead husband. A wolf pup who should have died continued to live. She named him Rex, because his cry had Rex-ed across the blizzard and pulled her into the storm. Because his arrival Rex-ed the last thing Thomas had died doing, saving something wild. Because he was alone in the world now. And so was she. Maybe, just maybe, they could Rex the families they had both lost. That first night was the longest of Amelia's life. Every 2 hours she fed Rex, warming the milk, coaxing him to swallow, 1 drop at a time. Between feedings, she kept him tucked close for warmth, monitored his breaths, and spoke softly to him, because she had once read that orphaned animals needed voices to feel less alone. She told him about Thomas, how much he'd loved these mountains and every wild creature in them. She told him about her children, with busy city lives, who phoned every Sunday like clockwork to beg her to move to a retirement home. She told him about the 47 years she'd spent in this cabin with the man she adored, and the 3 years she'd spent here alone, unable to leave, because leaving meant accepting that Thomas. Rex survived the night. When dawn finally arrived, pale, cold, and washed in gray, yet free of the storm's rage, he opened his eyes for the very first time. They were a cloudy, newborn blue, the same color all young canines share, and when they settled on Amelia's face, the intensity of that tiny gaze stole her breath. "Hello, little one," she whispered. "Welcome to the world." The second night proved far more difficult. Rex cried endlessly, a piercing, heart-wrenching wail that sliced straight through her. He was searching for his mother, for warmth, for the comfort of familiar milk that she could never provide. Amelia pressed him against her chest, feeling every tremor of his fragile body, and she sang to him. Songs she hadn't sung since her own children were infants. Asterisk, you are my sunshine. Hush, little baby. Asterisk. Old mountain tunes her mother used to hum. Her voice was worn, shaky, and off-key, but it soothed him. Slowly, his cries faded as he nestled into her neck. By the 3rd day, Rex drank his milk with more enthusiasm, though he was still far from safe. Amelia contacted the only person she trusted to hear the truth, Dr. Henry James, the local veterinarian for 3 decades, the man who had stood beside Thomas on countless wildlife rescues, one of the men who had pulled Thomas's frozen body from the creek the day he died. "You did what?" Henry's voice cracked sharply through the phone. Amelia explained. Silence followed, long, heavy, disapproving. "Amelia, that's illegal. Wolves are protected here. That means no interference. You can't just hide a wolf pup. You need to call Fish and Wildlife immediately." He would have died, Henry. Maybe. Probably. But that's nature. You know that. He paused. Thomas would have told you the same. Thomas died saving a deer. Amelia replied softly. He died proving that sometimes we're meant to intervene. Another long silence. Then Henry sighed, deep, resigned. "I'll come in the morning. I'll bring proper formula and check him over. But Amelia, this can't be permanent. You understand that, don't you? A wolf is not a dog. He will grow up wild." "I know," she said quietly. "But right now he's just a baby, and he needs help." Henry arrived the next day with large breed puppy formula, vitamins, and a small heating pad. He examined Rex with practiced, gentle hands, checking his heart, lungs, reflexes. "He's strong," Henry finally said. "Stronger than he ought to be, considering everything. You've done well, Amelia." But then his expression hardened. "Call your children. Tell them what you're doing. When this wolf gets bigger, you'll need help. And you'll face some hard choices." Amelia nodded. But she didn't call. Not yet. She knew exactly what Ava would say. She'd cry, beg Amelia to hand Rex over to authorities. Mateo would be furious, lecturing her about recklessness, insisting she was too old to care for a wild predator. But they didn't understand the empty quiet of this cabin. They didn't understand what it meant to cook meals meant for two but eaten by one, or to fill silence by talking to framed photographs. Rex needed her, and for the first time in 3 lonely years, something depending on her gave her life direction again. As days passed, Rex grew stronger. His eyes opened fully, the pale blue deepening toward the amber he would carry as an adult. He began exploring, legs wobbly but determined. He played with Amelia's slippers, gnawed the corner of blankets with his tiny teeth, and cried whenever she left the room. At night, he slept tucked against her side, his warm little body rising and falling with steady breaths. Amelia understood this couldn't go on forever. She knew Henry was right. She knew her children would be horrified. She knew Rex wouldn't stay small. He would one day be a 100-pound apex predator with instincts no human could tame. But that was a problem for the future. Right now, she had a wolf pup who needed round-the-clock feeding, who whimpered when he was lonely, who stared at her with absolute trust. Right now, she had a reason to wake up each morning. 2 weeks after finding him, Amelia stood in the kitchen preparing Rex's formula when she heard tires crunching up the long driveway. Her heart sank. She recognized that engine instantly. Mateo's truck. She could hide Rex. She had time. But why bother? He would discover the truth eventually. And at 72, she was done pretending. When Mateo knocked and let himself in, calling, "Mom, you here?" he found her standing in the kitchen with a wolf pup in her arms. The expression on his face would have been comical if Amelia's heart weren't thundering. "Mom," Mateo said slowly, staring at Rex. "Mom, what is that?" "This is Rex," she said calmly. "I found him during the storm. His mother was dead." Mateo stared at Rex, then at her, then back again. "Mom, that's a wolf." "Yes," Amelia said simply. "You can't keep a wolf." "I'm not keeping him. I'm helping him until he's strong enough to survive." Mateo dragged a hand through his hair, a gesture so heartbreakingly reminiscent of Thomas that Amelia felt her chest tighten. "Mom, this is insane. Wolves are dangerous. He will hurt you. And it's illegal." "Poachers shot his mother," Amelia said. "He was freezing to death in the snow. Was I supposed to walk away?" "Yes." Mateo's voice rose with panic. "Yes, Mom. That's exactly what you should have done. Call the authorities. You're 72 and living alone in the wilderness. What happens when he grows? What happens when he decides you look like prey?" "He won't," she said with more certainty than she actually felt. "You don't know that." He stepped closer, desperation in his eyes. "Mom, please. Give him to Fish and Wildlife. Come back to the city with me. Ava and I found a beautiful assisted living place. It's got a garden, activities, people. You wouldn't be alone." "I'm not alone," Amelia whispered. "I have Rex. He's a wolf, Mom. That is not family. Neither is that assisted living facility." They stood facing each other across the kitchen. Amelia saw the moment Mateo realized she wasn't budging. His shoulders sagged. "I'm calling Ava," he muttered. "And I'm calling you every day. And if that wolf does anything, anything to you, I'm coming back with Fish and Wildlife. I mean it." He left without another word, gravel spitting under his tires as he sped away. Amelia stood at the doorway, watching him disappear down the road. Rex's warm body rested securely in her arms. She felt his tiny heartbeat against her chest, his small paws kneading comfortingly at her shoulder. She had made her choice, and she would live with it. But as Rex yawned and nuzzled into her, letting out a soft, contented rumble, Amelia knew she had no regrets, not a single one. The first 3 months passed in a whirlwind of sleepless nights and constant worry. Rex grew at an astonishing rate. His gangly limbs stretched quickly, his paws became comically oversized, and his ears seemed too big for his head. His eyes darkened into a striking amber, and his puppy fluff thickened into the dense black coat that would one day armor him through brutal Canadian winters. He was breathtaking. He was wild. And he was utterly exhausting. Amelia soon discovered that raising a wolf pup was nothing like raising a dog. Rex didn't just chew shoes, he annihilated them. He destroyed 2 chairs, 3 rugs, and an entire corner of the couch. He dug enormous holes in her garden. And he howled at 3 in the morning, a long, haunting sound that Rex echoed through the valley and prompted concerned calls from the nearest neighbors miles away. The Johnsons, who lived 2 miles farther down the mountain road, were the first to notice something unusual. "Is everything okay up there, Amelia?" Helen Johnson asked on the phone for the 3rd time in a week. "We keep hearing strange noises, almost like a wolf or something." "Just the wind," Amelia lied smoothly, her eyes drifting to Rex as he shredded the stuffing out of a couch pillow. "These old cabins make all kinds of strange sounds." But Rex was becoming harder to hide. Feeding him became the greatest challenge. By 8 weeks old, he was turning his head away from the bottle, crying for something richer, something real. Wolves didn't live on formula forever. So Amelia drove into town, bought ground beef and chicken, and began feeding him raw meat. Rex devoured it with a hunger that was both mesmerizing and quietly terrifying. She watched his baby teeth rip the meat apart, saw the change that came over him as instinct switched on inside those amber eyes. That was the moment she understood with a chill. She wasn't raising a pet. She was raising a hunter. By 12 weeks, Rex was the size of a medium dog, all legs and ears and boundless energy. He wanted to play from dawn until dusk. He dragged sticks to her feet, chased leaves, leapt at shadows, and once proudly presented her with a dead mouse he'd caught behind the woodshed. He was so pleased with himself, tail wagging, chest puffed out, that Amelia had to sit on the porch steps and breathe deeply before she could force out a shaky, "Good boy." But there were moments so beautiful they made up for every chewed shoe, every sleepless night, every destroyed piece of furniture. The evenings when he curled beside her chair, resting his head across her foot as she read by lamplight. The way his ears perked and tail thumped whenever she called his name. The soft rumble he made when he pressed his forehead into her leg, seeking comfort. Or how he would carry his food bowl to her when he was hungry, setting it down with such earnest expectation that she couldn't help but laugh. He didn't communicate like a dog. He used a wolf's voice. A quiet hoof of sound for attention. A high, delicate whine when anxious. A deep, soft chuff when he wanted reassurance. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Hit the bell so you never miss an update. Thanks for watching. Henry continued to visit every 2 weeks to assess Rex's health and remind Amelia of the inevitable. "He can't stay here forever," he told her every time. "You know that. He's growing too fast. Soon he'll be stronger than you." "I'm not trying to control him," Amelia always replied. "I'm just giving him time." But Henry wasn't the only one worried. 3 months after Mateo's initial visit, Ava appeared unannounced on a bright Saturday morning, carrying bags of groceries and the determined expression Amelia knew all too well. "Mom," Ava said sharply after taking in the sight of the enormous black-furred, amber-eyed young wolf sprawled by the hearth. "We need to talk." Rex lifted his head, ears swiveling toward her. At nearly 4 months old, he was as large as a big dog, muscular, alert, undeniably wild. Ava stared. "Oh my God, Mateo told me he was big, but this, Mom, that is a wolf. That is not a puppy. His name is Rex," Amelia said calmly. "Can I make you breakfast?" "I don't want breakfast. I want to know what you're thinking." Her voice climbed higher. "You're 72. You live alone. You have a wolf, a real wolf, living in your house. Do you understand how absurd this is?" Rex, picking up on her agitation, rose and moved toward her, sniffing curiously. Ava retreated until her back hit the counter. Mom, make him stop. He just wants to smell you. Hold your hand out." "I am not holding out my hand to a wolf. He'll keep sniffing you until you do." Ava froze. Then, reluctantly, she extended her hand. Rex sniffed it carefully, gave one soft lick, and wagged his tail. Satisfied, he padded back to the fireplace, flopped down, and closed his eyes. "See," Amelia said, completely harmless. Ava wanted to argue. Amelia could see it. But something softened in her expression as she watched Rex settle. "You really love him," she said quietly. "Yes," Amelia answered simply. "Why?" Ava asked, the question that held everything. Why stay here with a wild animal when you could be in the city? When you could be near us? Safe. Amelia poured her a cup of coffee and led her to the kitchen table. They sat in the soft morning light. When your father died, Amelia began, voice steady but low, I lost my place in the world. We built a life here together. And then he was gone. And everything kept going but felt empty. Like I was a ghost walking through my own home. Her gaze shifted to Rex, grooming one oversized paw. Then I found Rex. And suddenly I mattered again. Someone needed me. Really needed me. Ava blinked back tears. We need you too, she whispered. You need me safe, Amelia corrected gently. But you don't need me the way this little soul did. Silence settled between them, warm and fragile. Finally, Ava reached across the table and gripped her mother's hand. Promise me you'll be careful. Promise you'll call if anything happens. I promise, Amelia said. Ava stayed for lunch. By then, Rex had completely disarmed her. He brought her a stick, his most valuable possession, and when she threw it clumsily, he bounded after it with such unrestrained joy that Ava laughed out loud. As she hugged Amelia goodbye, she whispered, He's lucky to have you. But as fall came and Rex continued to grow, Amelia began to wonder whether lucky was the right word at all. At 6 months old, he was now the size of a German shepherd, all sinew, strength, and sharp instincts. His teeth were formidable, his jaws powerful. He remained tender with Amelia, but the wildness in him had begun to surface more clearly. He froze like stone whenever he heard deer outside, tracked birds with unblinking predatory focus, paced the cabin restlessly, as if some ancient calling in his blood was tugging him back to the forest. Then came the incident with the Johnson's cat. It was early autumn. Amelia had let Rex out into the fenced yard, believing he'd be contained. But within minutes he'd tunneled beneath the fence and vanished into the trees. An hour later she found him standing proudly over the Johnson's orange tabby, blood on his muzzle, tail wagging as though he'd just accomplished something magnificent. Amelia had never been so furious. She dragged him home by his scruff, voice shaking as she shouted, No, bad. How could you? Rex only stared at her with bewildered, hurt eyes. He didn't understand. To him, he had done the very thing a young wolf was meant to do. He was simply being what he was. She shut Rex inside the cabin and drove straight to the Johnson's house to confess what had happened, apologize, and offer to pay for a replacement. Though nothing could ever truly replace 15-year-old Marmalade. Helen Johnson was gracious about it, kind even, but her husband Tom was not. That animal needs to be put down, he said bluntly. It's a danger. If it killed our cat, what's stopping it from coming after a child? There are no children on this mountain. Amelia tried weakly. That's not the point, Tom snapped, his face reddening. The point is you have a wild animal you can't control, and someone will get hurt. Amelia drove home in tears, knowing deep down that he wasn't wrong. She found Rex pressed miserably against the cabin door, whining anxiously. When she opened it, he crawled toward her on his belly, ears flattened, tail tucked tight, so ashamed and confused that her anger dissolved instantly. She sat down on the floor, and Rex placed his great head in her lap while she cried into his fur. He let out soft, worried whines and tried to lick her tears away. She knew she needed to call fish and wildlife. She knew a sanctuary could give him a safe life, with other wolves, with space, with no danger to neighbors. But she couldn't dial the number. Not yet. Just a little more time, she told herself. Just until he's ready.